I always thought success was the key to everything: money, status, respect. That's what I focused on every day, pouring myself into my career, thinking I was building a better future for Emily and me. But in the process, I started losing the things that really mattered. When Emily and I first met, life was simple. We were both passionate, full of dreams. She made me feel seen, understood, something I hadn't realized I needed. But as my career took off, I pushed her aside. I was so focused on the future I thought I wanted that I couldn't see the present I was losing. I feared failure in my career, but what really scared me was losing Emily. I started questioning if she still wanted me, or if I'd become someone she couldn't love anymore. I feared I wasn't the man she deserved. What if I'd already lost her without even knowing? I tried to convince myself that success would make everything okay. But deep down, I felt the ache of knowing I was losing her, and I didn't know how to fix it. My doubts grew louder, and my suspicions about us became too much to ignore. The day I decided to break up with Emily wasn't easy. It wasn't just about the fighting or the distance between us. It was the constant feeling that I was failing her. I kept telling myself that I had to focus on my career, that I had to keep pushing forward. But deep down, I knew I was losing the one person who had always been there for me. When I finally sat down with her, I could see the hurt in her eyes. She knew something was wrong long before I said anything. I told her I needed space, that maybe we were on different paths. I kept it vague, trying to hide the truth from myself as much as from her. I loved her. I always had. But I convinced myself that I had to let go so I could secure a future, that my success was the only way to fix everything. It felt like I was doing the right thing, like I was making a sacrifice for both of us. But as I saw her walk away, the reality hit. I wasn't sure if I'd made the right choice. After the breakup, I thought time would help me make sense of everything, but it only made things worse. I kept telling myself I had made the right choice, that focusing on my career was the only way forward. But the more I tried to bury myself in work, the more I started questioning what I'd really lost. Emily wasn't just a girlfriend, she was the person who understood me in ways I couldn't even explain. One night, a close friend of mine, Alex, mentioned something that hit me like a ton of bricks. He said he'd been hearing rumors around town, whispers about Emily, about how she seemed to be moving on, meeting someone new. I wasn't sure if I wanted to believe it, but the doubt began to creep in. It was like a knot forming in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I reached out to Emily, hoping for some clarity. She told me it wasn't what I thought, that there was no one else. But the more I listened, the more I realized something was missing, something had changed in her. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew she was no longer the same woman I had fallen in love with. The hardest part was accepting that maybe I hadn't just lost her emotionally, I had lost her trust. The idea of her being with someone else, even if it wasn't true, shook me to my core. I had pushed her away for so long, focusing on my own dreams, that I hadn't considered how it might make her feel. The weight of that realization hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to deny it, to ignore the signs, but I couldn't. I had to face the fact that I might never have the same connection with Emily again. And as painful as it was, that was the moment I had to accept the truth. My choices had consequences, and now, I had to live with them. After everything fell apart, I felt like I was living in a fog. I had spent so much time focusing on my career and what I thought was success, that when Emily walked out of my life, I felt completely lost. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was like I'd lost myself too. The person I had been before Emily seemed so distant, like a version of me that was long gone. I tried to push through it, telling myself that time would heal all wounds. But the truth was, I didn't feel whole anymore. The doubts crept in every day. Am I good enough? Was I ever good enough? My self-worth had been so wrapped up in my success, in the idea of being the provider, the protector, the man with a plan. But when Emily left, it was like that whole identity came crashing down. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling like I'd failed her, and failed myself. I had this image of the man I thought I should be, and it wasn't the reality I was living. Every day, I found myself questioning if I could ever be the person Emily needed, or even if I could be the man I wanted to be. There were moments when I would pick up my phone to text her, but the message would die before I could hit send. I felt this overwhelming sense of regret, this pressure to fix everything, but I didn't know how. My pride kept me from reaching out for help. After all, I was the one who had chosen to walk away, right? I couldn't let anyone know how vulnerable I really felt. But the more I internalized that pain, the more my self-esteem crumbled. It was like being trapped in a cycle: guilt, regret, and this constant nagging feeling that I wasn't enough. It was humbling, in a way, but it also forced me to face something deeper. Maybe it wasn't about being enough for anyone else. Maybe it was about being enough for myself. And that was something I had never fully realized until now. I had to learn to love myself before I could love anyone else. The days after the breakup were a blur. I didn't want to admit it, but I was heartbroken. I'd convinced myself that I was fine, that the decision to let Emily go was the right one, but the reality of it hit me harder than I expected. I couldn't escape the constant ache in my chest. It wasn't just the loneliness, but the deep sense of loss. I missed her presence, her laughter, the way she would always know how to make me smile even on the worst days. I thought I could handle it. I'd always been the strong one, the guy who had his life together. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. I'd sit in my apartment, staring at the walls, feeling this crushing weight of emptiness. It was like something vital had been ripped from me, and no amount of success could fill that void. I kept myself busy, working late into the night, diving deeper into projects that didn't matter as much anymore. I was avoiding my feelings, trying to outrun them, but no matter how hard I worked or how much money I made, I couldn't escape the fact that I was broken inside. I would catch myself daydreaming about Emily, remembering the way she would look at me when she was proud, the way we would laugh together until our sides hurt. Those memories were a double-edged sword. They reminded me of everything I had, and everything I had lost. And then, one night, the emotions hit all at once. I was sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling through old photos of us. The tears came without warning. I couldn't hold them back anymore. I had told myself that I was strong, that I could move on, but the truth was, I was lost. I had never really understood the depth of my feelings for Emily until she was gone. The pain was unbearable. I had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. It was like I had no control over my own heart. Every thought about her, every reminder of what we had, just tore me apart. I couldn't stop myself from thinking, did she ever really love me? Was I ever truly enough? But the most painful part? I knew I was the one who had pushed her away. I had built walls around myself, thinking they would protect me. But in the end, they only kept me from the one person who mattered most. And now, I had to face the consequences of that. There comes a moment in every breakup where you're forced to look at everything and ask yourself, was it worth it? That's the moment I reached, after weeks of sleepless nights and endless thoughts swirling in my mind. I had been so certain that breaking up with Emily was the right decision, but now, I wasn't so sure. My mind was a battlefield, torn between pride, regret, and this gnawing feeling that maybe, just maybe, I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I spent days rethinking every conversation, every moment we shared, wondering if there was something I had missed. Was there a way to save it? Could I have made more time for her? Should I have sacrificed something else, maybe my career or my ambition, to keep her by my side? The what-ifs were endless. On one hand, I told myself that it was too late, that Emily had moved on, that it was a waste of time to go back and try to fix what was broken. But on the other hand, I kept thinking about the way we used to be. The way she would support me when things got tough, the way she would laugh at my corny jokes, the way we could talk about anything and everything. It wasn't just love, it was a partnership, a deep connection that I hadn't realized I was missing until it was gone. I started to wonder if I could get back to that place. But then reality would hit me again. I couldn't just rewind time. I couldn't undo the hurt I'd caused her by choosing work over us, by thinking I could build a future without considering how she fit into it. I had told her I needed space, but maybe what I really needed was to let go of the idea that success meant everything. Maybe I needed to be the man who could balance both career and love. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. It wasn't about whether Emily would take me back. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about me. About figuring out who I wanted to be moving forward. Did I want to be the guy who chose ambition at the expense of love? Or did I want to be someone who could have both, someone who could grow professionally and still make room for the people who truly mattered? I couldn't answer that question right away, but I knew one thing for sure. It was time to face the truth. No matter how hard it was, I had to decide, once and for all, whether to move forward alone or try to rebuild what we had, even if it meant admitting I had been wrong all along. At some point, I knew I couldn't do it alone anymore. The weight of everything, the regret, the confusion, the heartbreak, it was starting to crush me. I had spent so long trying to convince myself that I was strong enough to handle it all. But the truth was, I couldn't keep pretending. I needed help. I reached out to my best friend, Brian. We'd been through a lot together, but this felt different. I didn't want to seem weak, but I had to face the fact that I was struggling. I called him one evening, after yet another night of sitting in the silence of my apartment, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. "Jack, man, you've been a wreck for weeks. What's really going on?" Brian asked when he picked up. I hesitated. It wasn't easy for me to admit how much I was hurting. I didn't want to sound like I couldn't handle my own life. But when I finally told him about Emily, about the breakup, and how I felt like I had ruined everything, it was like a weight lifted. Brian didn't judge me. He didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. He just listened. It felt good to get it all out, to finally speak the truth about how much I missed Emily, how much I was doubting everything I'd built. Brian didn't sugarcoat things either. He told me that if I wanted to fix things, I had to be honest with myself first. "You can't just rush back into her life without understanding what went wrong," he said. "You need to figure out why you made the choices you did, and what you're willing to change for it to work. If you really love her, it's not just about saying sorry. It's about showing her that you've grown." His words stuck with me. I realized he was right. I couldn't expect Emily to just take me back because I regretted losing her. I needed to prove that I had learned from my mistakes. That I was someone who could change, who could balance his career and his relationships without sacrificing one for the other. I also called my sister, Jessica. She's always been a voice of reason in my life, and I knew she would help me see things clearly. "You need to stop beating yourself up over this, Jack," she told me. "Life is full of mistakes, but the only way forward is to own them and move on. And if you want to make things right with Emily, you've got to start by making things right with yourself." It was a tough pill to swallow, but Jessica's words helped me refocus. I had spent so much time thinking about what I had lost, that I forgot to think about what I could gain. I could still grow, still become the man I wanted to be, even if Emily wasn't a part of my future. But if she was, if there was still a chance for us, I had to prove that I was capable of being better, for both of us. The more I talked to Brian and Jessica, the more I began to realize something important. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's not a switch you can flip, or a band-aid you can slap on a wound and expect it to be fine. It takes time, effort, and most of all, patience. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel that patience. I was finally ready to put in the work. I started by focusing on myself, something I hadn't really done in years. My life had always been about getting ahead, staying on top, but I never took the time to check in with who I was becoming along the way. I signed up for therapy, something I never thought I'd need. Talking to a professional gave me a safe space to really confront my feelings and break down the walls I had built around myself. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I felt like I wasn't making any progress. But bit by bit, I started understanding why I had made the decisions I did, why I had placed work above everything else. I also started working on my physical health. It might sound like a small thing, but it helped. I started running in the mornings, hitting the gym at night, and slowly but surely, I began to feel stronger, not just physically, but mentally as well. Exercise became my outlet, a way to channel all the pain and frustration into something productive. With every mile I ran, I felt a little lighter, a little more in control of my life. But even as I worked on myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. I wasn't whole yet. The ache of losing Emily was still there, still deep inside me. It wasn't as sharp as it had been before, but it lingered. I realized that no matter how much work I did on myself, I couldn't truly heal without facing the relationship I had lost. It took time, but I eventually reached a point where I felt ready to confront what had happened with Emily. I wasn't the same man who had ended things so abruptly. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more open to love. I had learned that true healing comes from understanding, not avoidance. And the more I focused on becoming the best version of myself, the more I realized that I wasn't just healing for me. I was healing for us. I still didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right path. I had the strength to face whatever came next, whether that meant moving forward alone or rebuilding what I had with Emily. It wasn't until I started to feel whole again that I realized something surprising. I wasn't just healing from losing Emily. I was also opening myself up to new possibilities. I'd spent so much time locked in the past, stuck on the what could have been, that I hadn't even thought about what could come next. It wasn't that I was looking for someone new, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Her name was Rachel. We met one rainy afternoon at a bookstore downtown. I was browsing through the business section when I overheard her talking to the store clerk about a book I had read a few years ago. Before I knew it, I was drawn into the conversation. What started as a casual chat about literature turned into a full-blown discussion about life, work, and everything in between. She was smart, kind, and surprisingly down-to-earth. There was something about her energy that was magnetic. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was just someone I'd met in passing, another friendly face. But as the conversation continued, I found myself thinking about her long after we parted ways. We exchanged numbers, agreed to grab coffee sometime, and before I knew it, I was looking forward to every conversation. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. There was a spark there, something genuine and unforced. As the weeks went by, Rachel and I spent more time together. We talked about everything, our past, our dreams, our fears. But more than anything, we talked about trust. I made it clear early on that I was still healing from a past relationship and wasn't in any rush to jump into anything serious. She respected that. Rachel didn't push me to open up faster than I was ready, but her patience and understanding made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. I also realized that this new connection was teaching me something important. Trust wasn't just something I had to rebuild with Emily. It was something I had to rebuild within myself. For so long, I had questioned my ability to trust, both in others and in my own decisions. But Rachel showed me that trust didn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. It was about being open, being vulnerable, and giving someone a chance to show you who they really were. As I spent more time with Rachel, I realized I wasn't just moving on from my past. I was building something new. And though I wasn't ready to rush into a new relationship, I could see the possibility of something beautiful forming. Rachel wasn't the answer to all my problems, but she was a reminder that love wasn't gone from my life. It was simply evolving. As time passed, something within me shifted. I had spent so many months focused on the past, on Emily, on the mistakes I had made, on the what-ifs that kept me up at night. But Rachel made me realize something vital. Life wasn't about holding on to regret. It was about opening yourself up to the possibilities that the future could hold. What I had with Rachel wasn't rushed, it wasn't forced, and it certainly wasn't perfect. But it felt real. We didn't try to replicate anything from the past. Instead, we built something entirely new from the ground up. She didn't ask me to be someone I wasn't. She loved me for who I was, not for who I used to be. And I loved her in return, not because I needed her to heal me, but because of the person she was. We traveled together, shared our dreams, and supported each other's goals. She knew about my past with Emily, of course, and I could tell that she understood the depth of my emotions. But Rachel didn't judge me for it. She didn't hold it against me. Instead, she embraced me for the man I had become after everything I had gone through. And that was the beauty of it all. I wasn't the same person I had been when I was with Emily. I had learned, grown, and evolved into someone capable of building a new chapter, one where I didn't have to be weighed down by past mistakes. There were moments, of course, when I felt the old fears creeping back in, the fears of not being enough, of losing someone I cared about, of making the same mistakes again. But Rachel never pushed me away. She gave me space when I needed it, and in the moments I doubted myself, she reminded me of my strength. She didn't just love me, she believed in me. And that belief, it made all the difference. Over time, I realized that this new love wasn't just about finding someone to fill the hole that Emily had left behind. It was about discovering that love could be different, that happiness wasn't confined to one person or one moment. With Rachel, I found something fresh, something that brought joy into my life every day. I didn't need to keep comparing it to what I had with Emily, because it was its own thing, beautiful and unique in its own right. It was then that I truly understood, love doesn't have to be the same to be real. It doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. And sometimes, the greatest love comes after we've been broken and rebuilt, stronger and wiser than we were before. Looking back, I can't help but think about how much I've changed. The man I was before I met Rachel, the one trapped in regret and lost in his own mistakes, feels like a different person. Life, as it turns out, doesn't always go the way we expect. But that doesn't mean it's not worth living. The past is what shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us forever. As I stand here now, I realize that the most important lesson I learned throughout this journey is that love isn't about finding perfection. It's about finding someone who helps you grow, challenges you, and loves you for who you are. Rachel did all of that, and more. I wasn't looking for someone to replace Emily. I wasn't even looking for someone to fix me. I was looking for someone who could walk with me through life's ups and downs, who could be my partner in every sense of the word. And in Rachel, I found that. When I look back on my life, I realize how much of it was built on a fragile bubble of beliefs I clung to because they felt safe. I thought success required sacrifice, that happiness could wait until I made it, and that love, real love, would withstand anything. These beliefs shaped every decision I made, for better or worse. Growing up, I was always the guy who thought he needed to prove himself. I wasn't the most confident, not the guy who got the girl in high school or landed the dream job right out of college. My life felt like a constant uphill climb. I thought, once I have enough money, once I have status, people will take me seriously. Then I'll be happy.